was first drawn to the piece because of the new media sense of it. As I referred to in the essay, I'm more or less an old world new media artist, and I was very intrigued by the level of involvement that he has mustered at this point. And I saw the work at hand as a great marker in that overall, not just his process, but in that new media domain, particularly going into virtual domains and internet and online, in-world, a whole range of territory, as it were, in the art historical landscape that I was interested in connecting to, and I believe in a way informing my own position, my own work, as to where it falls in this continuum, hopefully being also, of course, vital, not just a historical reference, but it does have some importance that that range of generations, in a sense, be kindred, and that there is, beyond the artwork, some exchange. Obviously, the artwork itself speaks to all of these issues probably much better than we will, but we'll attempt to give our points of view in the hopes of, for the cause, as it were. I think the initial approach, and I always tend to take this kind of distance in all things. It's pretty safe, probably. But the titling being the most kind of removed or ancillary to the piece, I wanted to begin with because, as I mentioned and I referred to in the essay in the catalog, that I felt that it's sometimes approached as a kind of like, well, you know, it's kind of an add-on thing, or, you know, well, what am I going to call this thing after you're done with it? In this sense, I thought that it was not only very well thought out and very sort of illuminating about the piece, but it was, in a sense, a part of the piece, that it is more than just a reference title to the piece, that I attributed it as being multimedia in the sense that it also was a textual element to all the rest of the structural elements and the content of the piece, that the titling was actually at the level of a part of the medium. And that, of course, is again my opinion, and I'm sure Janusz, in coming up with the title and deciding to commit to the title, which is also quite a position process, has his own view as well.
Yeah. Well, I was looking for a title that spoke about near future technologies, and I thought this one did a pretty good job of that in describing kind of a, well, I think, kind of a relationship that we have to things, you know, technologies, and how they are a little bit, in many cases, especially digital technologies, for a lot of folks, not quite graspable in a way, you know. And this piece was meant to show us this connection we have between the virtual and the actual world, and how that connection has there's a varying degree of space between those connections. That sometimes we're right, our toes are just touching that virtual world as we exist in this actual world, and sometimes it's a much broader expanse that we're looking into it.
So actually, immersion is not necessarily completely a deliberate process. I know to seek out the experience of the virtual is a pretty dedicated approach, but in your view, it's actually ongoing.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think that we all do exist in both worlds simultaneously, the virtual and the actual. And I talk a lot about avatars in my work and in things that I've written, where we through email, through social media, through even things like positioning sites like Foursquare and things like that, we are constantly placing ourselves inside of the virtual world and interacting with people all over the world through these avatars.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's a point of distinction in the degree, I guess. In other words, you're not just going into a closed world of a virtual space to have this experience. It's actually in a broader sense, varying degrees of it. Because I do believe that people are very, in a sense, unable to grasp things in total ways, and to say, well, you know, I go into in-world or virtual worlds, or that I never have gone. And it is, I think, a distinction that's important to make, that they realize that it makes an approach rather than some kind of major change of that's not already going on.
Right. No, we are, whether we are aware of it or not, existing, a part of us, a new piece of us is existing in these worlds, for sure. And I did work to address some of that in this piece, in using YouTube and Vimeo as a way of showing how people are putting themselves online, and not only that, but putting their experiences online, and not only that, putting the universe, literally the stars that surround us, online as a way of showing how we are, in the piece, showing how we are constantly going outwards and inwards simultaneously, into cyberspace, into outer space, into inner space, and social media space, kind of constantly. And to show that this universe now that we live in is incredibly multifaceted.
Yeah, the actual the notion of the texture of the piece. I mean, it provides in a way openness that is surprising. I mean, not surprising in a new media sense. The notion of classical perspective as a unifying part of the culture, and actually, in spite of what is hung off of it in terms of imagery, that framework has for a long time really been I guess, an orientation point for the making and the experiencing of art. This is obviously, even as a sculptural point of view, free of any imposed perspective. And instead, the multi-planes, the polyhedra, as it were, are much more, I think, informative of what we really know about space, time, and how the way dimensional in real physics, quantum physics, not just the world of material. And I'm wondering if the polyhedra become, or the environment for the piece become important in terms of making it hold a position in that space. Or if you were, I mean, you've looked at the form a number of different medium, a number of different ways before you realized it here. Did you find it transformative?
It did. I mean, in some of these images, you'll see I've left the progress bars for the YouTube and Vimeo videos as a way of indicating my interest in time. So to sort of talk about, to build on what you were saying, it's trying to be, in a fairly formal setting, a fourth dimensional kind of artwork, where it's not worrying about that traditional perspective, 3-4 point perspective, but that it's really trying to even though it has physical, it is physical and it's limited by its physicality. It wants to be a new media discussion and talking about, because it's talking about time and the space and this physics that you're describing. So it's a piece that's trying to do. It was always a challenge for me to try to make a piece that didn't take advantage of being able to plug it in and watch it, but be more, be about new media, and I would argue is still a new media piece, but not in the traditional sense, if you will, that we're used to thinking of new media.
Well, yeah, I think it to me, in many ways, it references in a sense, where new media as a process is in terms of making, in many ways, the reference to the mortality. I mean, talking about the temporal reference, I mean, the progress bars are brilliant, but the expansiveness of the cosmic images, or the images of the universe, and the images of mortality, I mean, that is like a temporal time spin.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. And I think that and one of the things that I begin to sense about virtual worlds is that the temporal nature of them. And you have said on other occasions, in other publications perhaps, that you feel that the passage of time is one of the unifying factors there. And I had some difficulty with, just in the sense of the references for it. 'Cause the references are typically, and this is very chauvinistic in a way, but they're typically material cues. But that being said, beyond that, aging, for example, change, but at the most distilled level, I think causality, and I have a real issue with wrapping my head around causality in the virtual world, and how that is actually related to time, or how time sense is related to that.
Well, I'll address the first part, and then let me see if that. So I think probably what I wrote about was that regardless of what world you're in, time is going to pass equally for you, the user, no matter what it is you're trying to do.
At some base level?
Yeah, exactly. At a very sort of base, fundamental sense. So I'm thinking back to that essay. It was, it may have to do with some of the escapism that people were trying to do by existing in places like Second Life, and that really there's always time is the universal. Well, what's the word? Kind of, it sort of smooths everything out, makes it even. It makes it kind of.
Yeah, it unifies things, but it flows different. I mean, people can say, "Well, I can't believe it was just like 3 hours went by."
Well, that's
incredible. How could I
right.
possibly? So I think the sense of time being relative too, as a dimension, is probably within limitations, of course. And I think that one of the things also about the idea of the content, in a sense, the content propelling content, the real content, of course, is larger than just this outer space imagery and the iconic figure. And I think that the skeleton is more of an iconic figure, but I want to get into that later. But those from a strictly human point of view, I think are probably the brackets for any kind of experience